Welcome to the Astro Lounge, a podcast that invites you to unwind, have a little fun, and engage in meaningful conversations with others in the astro community and beyond.
We're some astro babes turned astro besties who met at Astrology University. We believe in astrology that works with you and that your chart is completely special and unique. In this pod, we're going to have some fun with astro through games, discussions, special guests, and even more.
Hi, I'm Simona, a travel consultant turned astrologer. I now help people journey inward, serving as a guide towards deeper self-discovery, agency, and a more meaningful, wonder-filled life.
Hiya, I'm Kaia, an astrologer weaving the threads of my three passions together: theater, astrology, and witchcraft, all for the hopes of digging into these little cosmic winks for some doses of self-love and self-acceptance.
So sit back, relax, grab a cozy beverage,
and let's get cosmic in this Astro Lounge. Oh, hello.
Oh, hello, Kaia. Hello, how are you today?
Oh my goodness. Hello, Simona. I am very excited for this cup of coffee at 5:21 p.m. Saturday, February 28th, 2026. Saturday.
Perfect time. Perfect time for coffee.
And how are you doing?
Doing good. I'm so excited, as always, to be here
Yeah.
with you and to share with people our love for astrology and to do just another pod.
I know. Like we've done one, now we're doing another.
And here we are. Here we are. Yes. Hello, everybody that has joined us today. Kaia and I are looking forward to doing this episode with you. And you want to tell everybody a little bit what our focus is today?
Yes. Okay. Very excited. So, we are delving into our archetypal astrology use and how we use astrology. And what this is kind of called, it's called the story of the round. And I want to credit Simona for this actually. And it is a practice we have actually used at the retreats that we've helped to run with Astrology University, and they have proven to be this exercise has proven to be very meaningful, because it's very much process oriented astrology. So, what we're going to do is we are going to just look at the zodiac signs: Aries, all the way through Pisces. And we are going to kind of talk about the signs and their archetypal meanings, the kind of essence and energies of these signs, and how one might actually work with them in a process-oriented way. So it's very much, we're not necessarily going to be talking about our individual placements. Maybe they'll come up, or the current transits, but maybe they'll come up. More so using this type of astrology as a way to kind of move with our life. Wow.
Beautifully said, Kaya. Yes, we're going to go through all the zodiac signs because as we
Mhm.
mentioned a little bit in our intro, our focus really is on the process of how astrology is a living process, and the signs reflect that. And so often I think when we're first starting out, we learn some keywords about each sign. Aries has these qualities and Taurus have these qualities, but in essence they're all feeding into the next sign feeds into the next, and they're all part of a greater story. And so we're going to do this little exercise to help feel into that, because whenever we are starting something new, we are starting at the beginning of this process and we're essentially moving through this cycle. Now, we don't always complete the full cycle. It's not always so one next to the next to the next to next, but the idea is that we do go through this process of the zodiac whenever we do anything, really, whenever we start anything. So, Kaya, what do you think? Should we tell a little bit how we're going to start this off?
Yes. Oh, okay. So, what we do have a visual that will pop up here and there, and it's just going to be a visual of the signs, okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to start at Aries and we're going to work our way through all the way through Pisces. And it's a little bit what I like about this exercise, it's so interesting. It's always a little bit more abstract, and it's definitely one you kind of have to just like drop into and trust. So Simone and I, what we had discussed at the past retreats, we were like, okay, how's the way we can like share this? How can people work with this at the retreat? So I think Simona, you came up with the idea of like, let's say that someone, this mythical person, I don't know, is deciding to make this big move to Paris. Okay. So that's the mission, that's the goal, that's the example we're using. And as a group, we all talked about what might that look like, feel like, how might that come up. So we started with the sign of Aries and people chatted about what is it in the Aries archetypal realm that might give someone that like spark, that urge, the risk taking associated with Aries to move to Paris. And then we chatted about that, all the things that came up with that. And then Taurus. Okay, so maybe now we're trying to figure out how we're like gonna get material, our tangible needs met in this new space. And then we kind of went on through there. So Simone and I were chatting, like, do we use the example of moving, starting a new job, ending a relationship, big shifts in life? And we kind of decided on something else.
Yeah, we thought we might kind of explore our own personal journey that we've been on in becoming a professional astrologer and how starting with our studies and making that choice and moving through all the signs. And, we're not all the way through that cycle. So it'll be interesting. We haven't really, we've done a little prep, but we're just kind of going in here and being vulnerable and going for it and see what comes from this. So thank you for sharing this moment with us.
Yeah.
So in actuality, because this is a cycle, we will start with Aries, but technically we're really starting from you're emerging from Pisces. So
Mhm.
this idea of, before we take that leap with Aries, and we'll talk about that Aries archetype, we're coming from this place of Pisces. So we can imagine, let's say you are starting a new relationship. Well, there's this dissolving of where you've been, of letting go. Maybe you've been in a very intense relationship prior to that, and there's been a period of dissolving and letting go and accepting whatever that can be. And how do you then take in that next step? What does it take to trust again or to choose, yes, I'm going to start this new phase. So that's just to kind of anchor this into how it's always hard to get it going. So
Right?
we're coming from Pisces land, so maybe that's also part of it. It's a little bit elusive when you start out. So thinking
Exactly.
about our own journey and our studies and taking that leap to go, yes, we're going to embark on, first of all, on this 4-year professional astrology program. That takes a little bit of like saying yes to that. That's an investment, that's a time investment, a financial investment. So let's think about how's that felt for
Love
you,
that.
Kaia?
That's beautiful. I was like, God, so many things are already coming up. I'll share the picture really quick. Does that
Yeah,
work for you?
let's share
Sweet.
that sounds
Okay.
perfect. Yes.
Awesome. So if you're watching on the visual, this is what we mean when we're looking just at the signs of the zodiac. So um, we see wherever, if you see the number one, that course that is where Aries is. And we're gonna go, oh my goodness, is it counterclockwise?
Yes.
Yeah. I always have struggle with
I
clockwise.
love, no, I get that. Yes,
Oh
yes.
dear. So
On
we're
either
gonna
side.
go, well, we're kind of starting with Pisces, Aries
That's right.
over
That's
here
right.
on the left. Yeah. And so, but as you guys can see, like that, and astrology, it's all about cycles, it's all about patterns. Like, and again, we're not looking at our individual charts, we're just looking at like a blank slate chart, right? And we're starting here, we're gonna literally walk our way through the circle, these fixed constellations in the sky. So I just wanted to show that. We'll pop that up here and there. Okay, so I'm just going to stop the share. Okay, so okay, with us, I was like, okay, what was coming up? What we're thinking about, we're kind of starting in this Aries Pisces land. We're starting the cycle, using the cycle of the round for our studies. For me personally, I feel like when Pisces comes up, we also are embracing this archetypal realm of like letting things go, letting going with the flow, surrender. And that's so hard. And what came up for me was by the time I was looking to join Astrology University, I had literally lost a theater space. And that was a big part of my vocation and career mission was theater. And it's still in my life and it's coming back and we'll get there. But I'm really seeing how that kind of had to dissolve, evaporate. That's all. And I'm moving my hands. Wow. I
No,
didn't mean to do that evoking Pisces. But like things are starting to fall apart over here, right? And it kind of created this opening. And now I'm over here in Aries land and I like deciding it takes I was excited, and I think leaned into the Aries courage of like, okay, if I want this to happen for myself we got to do it. And I was like, oh, this is like no one in my close personal life right now is like in this realm of study. They're either in theater or other realms of life. Like this is for me. And it's something I'm finally admitting that I fucking want. I want it. I want. And I think that's a big Aries urge. How did it, oh,
Yes.
yeah, how is it coming up
No,
for you?
I just,
Oh, yeah,
yes, I
yeah.
love like the words that you use because Aries, there is that like I'm excited. There's an excitement, there's
Yeah,
a fire, there's a spark.
yeah.
But even with all of that excitement, spark, passion, whatever that initiation, that thing that thrusts us into it, there
Mm,
is still there's that overlap. And and for me, we started right around the end of 2020, so
yeah.
we're also COVID land. So there's this kind of quality there of just letting go of whatever we had been doing this whole time before COVID, right? But
Yep.
I've been a travel consultant for about 15 years, and it was something that I enjoyed doing, but deep down I knew it wasn't my calling. I always knew that, even though I really got a lot out of the process. So I'd always been wanting to find that thing. And over time in astrology, I would say from like 2017, 18, started to become more and more a passion of mine. And it started to feel like, wow, there really is something here that I'm connecting with on a level that feels really purposeful. And so by that time, when I started this program in Astrology University, I'd already been really into just like self-study. I'd also been studying a little bit on the side with someone here in Los Angeles. But at this point, it was like I was just still, even though it was COVID, I was still kind of working with clients, helping them tie up loose ends and process of letting go of that identity because I had been a travel consultant for, 15 years, a chunk of time.
Long
So
time.
of course I had that enthusiasm, that excitement, that passion. And it was something I'm like, of course I'm going to say yes to. And I think because I have the moon in Aries, there's a
Mm,
part of me, and that's something that we can kind of think about as we're going
yeah.
through, as you guys can think about if whoever's listening, is what placements you might have and what part of the process might come more easily or naturally. So there was that part that I'm like, yes, I'm going to dive in, of course, with having that moon in Aries, that felt comfortable. But also, even though I was ready to let go of this identity of being a travel consultant, there was still some quality that was just like really owning that I was doing.
And did you have other people in your life who were following this astro route, or was it kind of like, and the reason I'm asking this is because I think with Aries, we kind of forget that sometimes there's like little bit of a lone wolf quality because it's not necessarily, it's the opposite of Libra, right? And so actually you see a lot of folks who, even with all like the fiery and energy stuff of Aries, I wouldn't say it's always the most necessarily like social. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So yeah, I guess two questions in one there. But yeah, did you have anyone else in your life doing it?
There was nobody else in my
Yeah.
life that was doing astrology. What is interesting, though, in the last couple of years at at the travel agency,
Yeah.
a coworker came in towards the end. A new person came in who I became friends with, and she had godparents that were or her godfather, I believe, was an astrologer, and so like she was very well versed. But no one in my life, like family or anybody that I knew, had pursued astrology. And I've always been someone that's kind of carved my own path. I've definitely not followed the kind of path like first you do A, then you do B. I've always followed that spark. And again, I think that speaks to that moon and Aries in me. But it's not everything, it's not with everything. So I think sometimes I really have to, if I have to jump into something that maybe isn't as comfortable, or let's put it that way, sometimes we have to start something or go on a journey that isn't always our choice. Let's say it's like a medical thing that we have to face. There's courage in that. So kind of trying to find how to tap into that Aries energy when it isn't so easy. That's also part of it, right? And I think
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit about the Aries archetype.
Yeah.
What's involved there because
Absolutely.
a word courage keeps coming up, and
Does.
it's not always easy to do.
No, no, it's the hardest thing, because I think what I really admire about the Aries energy is this like sometimes unabashed ability to go after what this energy might want or crave, but like God, that's kind of scary to just like embark on, courage requires so much. Like you can be completely fear-ridden. And I think a lot of people with Aries energy, they might have that fear, but maybe it helps, it's a motivating quality for them, or they kind of need it. You kind of need that crisis, that little
The
combative
adrenaline, the adrenaline, right?
adrenaline. Oh, that's a
Yeah.
great word for Oh, I love that. Yes. Oh my God, I need to use that more for Aries because I'm thinking about the Aries heavy people in my life and like it's so funny. My boss was the other day was like, "Oh yeah, I when this person's working in this part of our job, I like to kind of fuel them by making it seem like a competition."
That's
And
perfect.
that person has a lot of Aries
Yeah.
placements because I love the word spark for Aries because if we're just kind of looking at the signs, like this is the first fire sign, this is primal, raw, feral energy. Like, and it's an energy I'm trying to bring into my life more. I have it Mercury in Aries retrograde, and so it was really cool, thinking about these thoughts and them coming alive, in this kind of Aries way where it's not necessarily rational, but it's a very fire, it's this fire element, and then each sign is assigned an element and then a mode, cardinal, mutable, fixed. I know I did that. It's cardinal, fixed, mutable. My apologies. And cardinal energy is very, let's start the thing. It's initiating, it's taking action, it's taking the first step forward. So literally this energy, Aries, fire, and then it's cardinal, boom, you gotta go. Yeah.
It's the first yes. It's saying yes to
Yeah.
whatever it is. It's like saying yes to the hero's journey or whatever that,
Mm.
and I threw in this like
Yeah.
example of, sometimes you have to take a leap and jump when it's something you don't love. And I think,
Yeah.
Aries is that spark, but if you are faced with something, like let's say you were diagnosed with something that's really difficult, that Aries energy to go, yep, I'm going to face this, I'm going to fight this, I'm going to go through this, that there's something to that too, to have that fight to go forward, kind of yes to life in general. It's a
And
yes to embracing life and meeting it directly, like
God,
head on.
yeah. No, and head on. That like when we think of the ram.
I
I
don't
did,
even
I did this like the ram. But like, and rams, they're like, "Meh." They just like fucking go for it, like,
right.
"Meh." And I'm glad that you also brought up, because it's easy to be like all these things in life, but also the hardships, and being able to tap into that Aries-ness, um, or like having to leave things, or starting a new venture means. A lot of the times you're having to leave that other stuff behind, Pisces. And also, it's like, are you willing to fight for what you want? Are you willing to make this? Commitment is not necessarily a word I would use for Aries, but what more so like commitment to fighting for yourself, because it could have been easy to be like, oh, this looks so cool, the programs, but and I'm saying this because I had done this before, kind of evading opportunities or dismissing potentials, dismissing advantages, but something clicked, and maybe it was the Pisces space because things had dissolved, but like it's easy to say, no, it couldn't work because of this X, Y, and Z, and sometimes that's completely valid life. But if there is a way to make it work, yeah, it feels like I know faith is not necessarily an Aries word by any means, but I like how you and I sometimes find different things for signs. And I don't know, there's something to me, and maybe it's just with the fire signs in general. It is that like risk faith. I don't know.
Risk,
You
absolutely.
know?
I mean, to be able, you have to kind of have some kind of faith in that
Yeah,
when you do leap, you're going to land
sure.
somewhere. Think of a warrior going into battle. There's that
Yeah.
bravery, that courage, and you almost like, you know what? I have faith in that this is part of part of it. I don't know how to quite ground it in what I'm trying to say here, but I
Well, Taurus
completely
is next.
what was that?
Sorry. I said, yep, sorry. You said, I don't know how quite to ground it, and I interrupted very Aries. And I said, well, Taurus is next.
Yeah,
So we were about
perfect. Well,
there.
why don't we transition to Taurus? That sounds
Okay.
perfect. Why don't we transition to Taurus? I like that. So we've said yes to life, we've said yes to the journey, we've said yes to our astro studies, and
Yeah.
now we move
We're
to
a Taurus
Taurus.
land. Yes, where things slow down, right? So if Aries is cardinal, initiatory, let's go for it. Fuck it. I'm taking a risk action. Yeah, that's a lot of energy. So in the northern hemisphere, at least, the spring equinox, That's Aries season. So things are bursting forth. Life is has been culminating beneath the surface and now it's bursting forwards. And now Taurus brings that's like April, May, I can do months, right? And we're settling into the springtime, which is also a little bit more constant. And I'm being mysterious about this because Taurus is a fixed earth sign, and fixed signs have this ability to kind of be in the moment, here, now, consistency. We're slowing down, we're maybe following through, we're boom, 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 boom. And Taurus is perhaps, and I say this as a Taurus sun, the slowest of the zodiac signs, baby, because we are taking time to slow down, to literally smell the roses in the garden, all that beautiful Venusian imagery. But also something fascinating about Taurus is values. That's a big, big thing that comes under Taurus's domain. And do you feel like values or grounding or these Taurus energetics were coming up for you?
Oh yeah, in the process of starting the study,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, I think it's a moment where there's all that excitement with Aries, and then you start to lay the foundation. You have to get a little bit, yes, as things start to go, this is now real. Like we're now in this moment, we now have to, whatever this part of the phase is, what do you need to do to feel secure and to have like your
Mm,
roots? You got to establish those roots. You what is bringing you that comfort and that kind of solidity that's going to set you up, right? So as you're starting the studies, what is going to set us up for success? A strong foundation, but also the question that you asked, we start off, is this something that really does resonate with my values? I think that is a huge word for Taurus. So that's definitely part of the process. And whatever you're doing, if you start a new job, is I'm getting settled into the job. Does this feel like something that reflects what I value? That's really important. So for me, yes, and
yeah.
then it didn't take long. I mean, I already knew astrology was something that I value, but the program itself, I'm like, wow, I really feel like I'm going to get the tools that are going to set me up, that are going to lay that groundwork to succeed moving forward. So I think there's a lot of that, laying the groundwork,
Mm,
knowing what do I already have? That's a word for Taurus. What do I have? So what resources do I have to draw upon as I move into this phase? Because while this phase itself, while this journey itself is new to me, I can still draw upon things. So that's another thing we can explore here, what you have, your resources, those kind
God,
of
what I
qualities.
already have. And I think that's such a great Taurus because what it opens up for me is like Taurus energy can really help you be in the moment, which helps you appreciate, as you said, what you already have. Like there's a lot, because it's ruled by Venus. Venus, these beautiful things, the beautiful pleasures of life. But Venus is also about what we value, right? And yeah, there's just this beautiful connection when we slow down and we're in the moment and we realize what we already have, the abundance. That's a word I feel like is associated with Taurus a lot. Abundance, fertility, growth, and all those kind of very different expressions. And yeah, it's like now the excitement's there still, maybe from Aries, but as you said, it's real because this is Earth. Fire is all visions. Let's go, boom, 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 boom. And then and that's what I love about astrology is like now we're seeing, okay, like because each sign, like some astrologers say, each sign that comes after another sign, each corresponding sign kind of offers a corrective. I like more like I don't know if I love that word, but like it's a little bit of a response to the sign
I
before.
love that word.
Yeah,
Response is such a great,
response.
it's a
There we go.
response. I love that
Like
word for
that,
that.
right? Yeah, I'm like correction, but response because they're like chatting. Aries helps Taurus realize this, but then Taurus helps Aries. Oh, wait, remember we gotta slow down. We gotta okay now. Like you and I. Okay, so we have. I need to figure out when to do my homework. I need to figure out when to do my studies. Do I have all my resources? Have I gotten all my books? The schedule, the classes. There's a consistency. As you said, it's building the foundation.
Yeah, I love that you brought up all the books and the textbooks. I was going to, as you were talking, I was thinking it's very like there's a practicality here. There's all that excitement, but now, okay, how do we set our schedules that will set us up for success?
Yeah.
How we do have to get all of those supplies. We have to have our textbooks. We have to have those materials, right? So those are all
Yeah.
part of it. So Taurus, it's when we also think about where we might what part of the process we might more readily embrace and where we might get stuck. Taurus
Ooh.
literally can be a sign that
Yeah.
can get stuck, right? Or get kind of, so let's think about it a little bit
Okay.
here. So this stage, how might what are some things that might cut up where we might just get stuck in this stage?
Oh man. I know, I'm like, wow. Well, oh, this is it. This is a fascinating question because yes, and as a Taurus sun, I'm like, yup. Um, well, I'm thinking about certain value systems, and like how I thought my life was in alignment or accordance with some of my values, but then I was discovering maybe it wasn't. And it takes me a long ass time to make these huge shifts, and I'm like, and I could sense some stagnancy on some of the things that weren't in alignment with my true values. And I think Taurus really introduces like, this is what you say you value, but what are you actually spending your time and attention on? Right? Yeah, 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 yeah. So there were, for me, I was trying to figure out, because it's so much information you're absorbing in the first year, it's really easy to get overwhelmed, which then can lead to stagnancy as well. And I know we'll probably embrace this in Gemini as well too, but it's just so much information. So I was like I was feeling a little stuck, I think, in like establishing routines for like self-care or sleeping because it was also during COVID, and quarantine, so things were very different, So, I wasn't like trying to ground down into the rituals. It's hard,
Yeah.
especially when you're embarking this a new journey. Yeah, so that's where I was starting to feel that kind of stagnancy was like in my own routines and rituals.
Right. Well, and I'm also thinking how, this isn't, we're going through this in kind of like the whole cycle, but we
Yeah.
can fall back to these parts. We can like, we can imagine like maybe we get really stuck in that Aries part, we're always starting something new, but never like
Yeah.
grounding into the next step. And, or maybe we were laying the foundation, we're getting all our books, we're ready to go, but now we start to move into like the learning stage and it can
Yeah.
get I want to go back to getting all my stuff. I had a boyfriend once, he would always start these new ventures and then he would buy all the stuff. I think that's Taurus too. All the stuff to get started. Like if you wanted to be a DJ,
Yeah.
you had to buy the most expensive, he'd have all the stuff. But then when it came time to move past the getting all
Yeah.
that stuff, it's like, no, we can get caught in any part of the process. So it's just something that came to mind. So in
That's
any
such a good, yes, yes. It's like you get all your like your pens and your
yeah.
notebooks for school, and then you're like, oh.
Yeah, the learning part. Ooh, that could be. Yeah.
Yes, yes. That's great.
Do you want should we transition a little bit into Gemini now?
Yeah, because yeah, these first four signs of the zodiac, completely different energies. Well, they're the first introductions, right? Of the
Yes.
elements. So we've met fire, we met earth, so we met cardinal, we met fixed. Now it's time for some air.
Immutable air. Yes. Time for things to
Amazing.
circulate a little bit. Yeah.
Ooh, you're coming up with all the great keywords today. I love this.
I don't know,
Circulating.
but
I know. So,
Gemini seems like, especially for this process of learning, is pretty appropriate. But in
yeah.
anything, I think this is a stage where, if you set up the foundation, now it's time to spread out. And obviously, with something like learning astrology, now this is the point where we're starting to take in information. And in this case, take in information from lots of different teachers. So there's a lot of that coming in, gaining knowledge and learning and all of that. But even if it weren't something like studying a new topic. Let's say it was the moving to Paris. This is a time
Yeah.
where you might start to kind of explore your surroundings and start getting to know who's around and communicating with people around. And we need to get curious about things now. We got to get past all of this. We're here, we're set up. We have to get curious. Does
Hmm.
that come to mind? What about for you, Kaia?
I love the Gemini energy, and it's so appropriate. I got Venus there, but of course. So it's so appropriate for the school, and also Tony, who runs Astrology University's got like Virgo, Gemini. That's very mercurial. So we're entering, yeah, Gemini, which is ruled by Mercury, which is literally the planet of communications, how we think, how we process, assimilate, digest info, and Gemini. the leap from Taurus, that's such an interesting energetic shift, because this is air, so it's communication, it's thinking, it's logistics, it's connecting the dots, especially with Gemini. And it's immutable. So we were fixed with Taurus, and now mutable. The mutable signs are like, I want to lean into flexibility and shifting, and I said this, but maybe I'll do that. There's a little bit of that flitting around. A lot of astrologers bring up the imagery of the butterfly in the garden, the pollinator. And so yeah, for me, for you, I could imagine like, especially with AU, Astrology University, we have a multitude of perspectives. And Gemini's great at offering flexibility, at offering curiosity, remaining flexible. And so, like, for example, one of the courses we did, I think it's because we grade them, course 5, the luminaries, where you're looking at your sun and your moon. And then you have to run them in different house systems. So that'll be
Mhm.
another topic for another podcast. But like, for example, I use whole sign, Simona uses Placidus. But one of our assignments is you have to run your chart through these different house systems. And sometimes the planets shift houses. And if you've only like looked at one, it can be kind of like, to be like, oh no, like my sun is in the seventh and in most quadrant, but it's in the eighth and whole sign. And it's interesting to see, are we going to be able to open up our perspective and be curious about how our individual placements could look like in different systems? Are we able to take in multitudes of multiple perspectives from different professors who might be contradictory or very different in their approaches, and then also holding our own? So it's like a lot of absorbing the data and the info, but maybe try not to cut it off in the first year because it can be easy to do that. I don't know about you, but yeah.
No, absolutely. Yes, I love all these things that you brought up, and especially even I was thinking with the house systems, there's all this information coming in, and it can feel sometimes contradictory. But
Yeah.
the job here, right? Our job is how curious and open can we be to let that all, because it can become very overwhelming taking in
Yeah.
all this information, and we can become scattered.
Yeah.
Some of us can become scattered. It's a quality that also goes with Gemini. It can be over here.
Oh,
So how do we embrace this part of the process and also reach out to fellow students in our cohort,
mm,
connect with other people,
oh,
share
great.
information, speak the language of astrology. So
Yeah.
if it's a job, maybe we start to talk a little bit more with our coworkers, get to know them. For moving to Paris, like I already said, we get to know what our surroundings are. But it's really, I think, very much about being open and curious, especially when you're starting to take in a lot. And we see this happening with year one students, and
Yeah.
even later on down the line, where it's like, there's just so much. How do
Yeah.
I stay with this? Learning's not easy. It's not easy. Even if something, even for those people that maybe a certain, like, let's say for some people astrology comes more naturally than others, but you do run up against these things.
God, that's such a good point. Yeah, because Aries and Gemini, I would not say these are signs who are like, they're usually, it can get uncomfortable. Taurus is very about comfort, and we'll embrace that in Cancer too. Comfort, security. And with that, something sparked in my mind when you were speaking. Very Gemini. Um, Gemini is also associated, of course, with learning, of course, but also like early school days. So
Yes.
also, yeah, like how we might have learned in school, and also the potential issues or challenges that came up with that. For example, like I didn't really, I mean, I knew I liked learning and loved learning, but it didn't really hit until college because I was really behind in math. I just struggled with science. There were a lot of struggles that I had, and I felt like I was not capable enough. Like I didn't feel like my intellectual capacity was like there. And so, and Tony is always saying, like, he's like, it's interesting to see, because most of the people who enter the program are well into adulthood. We don't typically get anyone under 18 or whatnot. Um, and it can kick up school issues and learning stuff. And that can be a lot. Like for me, I was like, oh God, I like we would have Sunday essentially class where we'd be talking about, it's like called a Q&A, and we talk about like the previous week and any questions about homework, blah blah blah. And there's be some people who had no issue about talking or sharing. And I realized I always had my video on, but I wasn't speaking. And it's because I was getting kind of tripped up because I was like, oh, maybe it's a silly question to ask. Like, I don't, you know. So that was something that came up too.
The learning wound. There can be a learning wound, or that exactly that feeling of like I'm not smart enough, or I
Yeah,
don't know how to communicate this, and that can shut down. For some people, that could shut that whole process down. If it's one thing, if you're stopping the cycle, you stop to move because you realize, oh, this doesn't align with my values, or I'm
right.
learning this and this isn't really whatever it is. It's not always
Mm.
about going through a whole cycle,
Yeah,
but
that's great.
more to the point is how can we work with these signs if we're getting caught, not because something isn't aligning with us in like a deeper sense, but
Mhm.
because there's something from the past or something that is difficult that maybe we don't have a lot of Gemini, or it's an uncomfortable energy and we keep getting caught at that stage. How might we push
Yes.
through that? How do we work with those wounds? And for me, when I felt stuck, I'll reach out to you, and
Yeah.
talking it out. That could be a very Gemini way, talking it out and trying to find avenues to push through that. But it's like
Yeah.
communication is a big part of the Gemini archetype. And
God, so big. That's such a good point, Simona. Sorry, I was like, yes, getting excited by that. Yeah. Oh, because I wanted to say like five different things at once.
so
Gemini.
Gemini, it's perfect. It's
Well,
perfect.
because what kind of sparked was like you said that beautiful thing, and then it was bringing up how maybe cancer is kind of approaching because when you're
Yes.
talking about sharing, and maybe this is a little bit more in cancer territory, which I know we'll get there in just a sec, but I found that like although I was building friendships and like I'm usually a fairly social person, I'm grateful that usually comes with some ease. But I also, quarantine was also kind of not necessarily interested in building community. And I was like, why am I being kind of resistant to that? And that'll come up in other signs too. But when we go into like cancer too, like having to like learn, like we're all going to be together presumably for 4 years. So it's like we got to start talking and communicating and connecting.
I think it's great that you're setting up cancer like that for several reasons. One is, yes, I think what I hear coming out is like, okay, this is going to be, it's our cohort. We're going through
Yeah.
this with other people. And eventually you're going to ask, well, do I belong here? That's a big cancer thing for me. Is this feeding that sense of belonging? And it also by cancer, we're getting to the first square to Aries, which is that like tense 90-degree. We talk about, we don't want to get too far in the weeds here with aspects, but it's that kind of that moment of, I don't want to say crisis necessarily, but of tension. Oh yeah, we have we've been forgetting to put this up, but we're at this stage now. And here's Cancer and here's Aries. So this is where things can really start to get kicked up in the
Mm.
process, because at this stage, you've gone out on the journey, but now are these your people? Do I feel like this feels like, in a sense, does this feel like home? Is this feeding my emotional sense of security? These kind of questions start to come up with Cancer.
And also cancer, to go off that is, I would say the first sign that we're really leaning, to second what you're saying, into vulnerability, because cancer, and that's because this is water. Now, this is the first water sign we're meeting in the zodiac. So we have met fire, earth, air, water. So it's also kind of interesting to see the conversation just amongst the elements and the signs.
Yeah.
Astrology is so layered. Oh my God, I love it.
And there's such a logic to it, even though it's intuitive, but there's a logic. It's
Yeah,
beautiful.
it's
Throwing in
beautiful.
our
We
love
love
for
it.
astrology in here every other sentence.
I know. Just in case they weren't aware that we are
Yeah, in
upset.
case you weren't aware of that, we love astrology.
We love
Okay.
it. We love it. And yeah, it's I love the Cancer energy. So this is water. First water, but now and then it's a square, which means what it shares with Aries is that it's cardinal, but it also provides that lovely friction, push-pull energy. So now we're already seeing connections, different conversations with just the signs themselves in the zodiac. These are four very different energies. And then Cancer and Taurus are in a what we would call a sextile 60 degrees. Yes, searched it out myself there. Oh no. Um, and that's interesting. And then Gemini are in a little conversation there. And yeah, like we are, it's community, it's care. And people, like astrology is deeply personal. People would open up about their charts or open up about stories because, and sometimes it would get you in the moment, you know? And are you willing to like let your sensitivity be seen by others in your cohort or by Tony or by a teacher, you know, like this is a sensitive point, Cancer. It's ruled by the moon, and the moon is anything if not emotional and sensitive.
That's right. And I love put ourselves out there, come out of our shell. Are we willing to come out of our shell and embrace this and be vulnerable? Because yes, it is a water sign. It's the first water sign. And are these the people that you feel can you do that with? There all these
Yeah.
questions come up. And sometimes, you've been comfortable all along the way and you get to this process of opening up emotionally, even the homework assignments. Some of the
Oh my God.
questions are technical, but some of the questions are very personal. And
Yeah.
people are wanting to open up sometimes, but there might not be a comfort with that. So is this a place, do we get tripped up at the cancer stage when it starts to get too much like, okay, now I'm starting to bond with people and this starts to feel like a family? What comes up at this stage of the process? Do we cut out? Do we go, oh, this is too much, I feel too exposed, and go back? All these kinds of things can come up at this stage, but it also is a time where we might really solidify that yes, this is where I belong. This is
Yeah.
really where I belong. But we might also get tripped up. You asked a question before, has anyone in your family or anybody that been on this journey? Maybe this is the part where all of a sudden it's like, uh-oh, my
Mm.
family doesn't approve of this. And it
Mm.
starts to come up. It starts to
Yes.
come up. You said yes to this, but maybe there was always in the background this kind of sense that it wasn't something other people approved of. Is this my family now? Is this where I belong? Am I going to allow these kind of other things, these other feelings to stop this? Just some questions that can come up, some feelings that can come up.
God, definitely feelings. I know. And yeah, because it definitely Cancer is the and when we get to Capricorn, that like that's parents, it's home, it's family, that polarity, that axis. And whereas Gemini might have brought up early school days, early learning, any struggles there or strides, Cancer might kick up stuff and also stuff from the past because Cancer is associated with, yeah, ruled by the moon. And with Cancer, we enter this archetypal realm of sometimes nostalgia, of memory. And I can't remember which astrologer it was who was like, Cancer is like when you're listening to that song that came up that you weren't expecting and it pulls at your heartstrings and it pulls up just like a visceral memory and it's so deeply felt, like, and so there might be some stuff that comes up there. And then for me personally, I think it was, and maybe we weren't as close the first year, but when we did become closer, I was like, oh. Like that's really when the community for me starts to settle in, I think was actually getting closer to you. And then
Oh,
that opened up, right? Communications and connections. So Gemini and Cancer with other TAs and then some of other friends in the program. And like when we got to do the retreats, because we went to each one of them, which I'm so glad I did for myself, but that was especially by the second, third time we went on the retreats, like feeling the sensitive emotional connection and like astrology is a home base. Like I'm gonna just speak for both of us. Like sorry.
you can speak for me.
Right?
We've got that kind of,
Yes.
you can speak, it's fine.
Like I can't ever give this up, and I know you feel the same way too. Like no matter how it goes throughout our lives, like this is such a home. And that's what I appreciate about Cancer. Like home doesn't have to just be your bloodline or people who are unsafe or uncomfortable in your life. You get to also, it's cardinal, so you can also choose how you want to have family or roots. Yeah.
Who's your family? And I'm
Yeah.
I'm very happy you brought up the retreat, and it just brought back that memory of when we were staying. When we were in graduating, it was the class, the first cohort that graduated right before us, and we stayed in that Airbnb.
Oh,
Isabella Scanciolo, we're gonna have on here, of course. We love her. And Rachel, she didn't stay with us, but she came by, and Natalie was there. But it was like this, it
oh,
felt so Cancerian as an experience because here we are kind of cocooned together in this Airbnb, opening up, feeling safe to open up and share. And it felt like my family, like a family feeling and that sense of bonding and connection. So, that's all been part of the process. You start off like this is the journey, and then it starts to take on different forms, and it takes on a life of its own, and other things emerge. And something that of course, I was looking to connect with people, but I never thought it would be quite like this, and there's that sense of
No.
family. So it's, in any case, that image came to mind of all of us in that Airbnb. It really had that cocooning feel.
I love that for Cancer. Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. I know, and it's like every time we talk about the planets or the signs, like we inevitably evoke the archetypal energy.
No, now
Like,
I'm crying.
and we're like, "Ugh." Yeah, yeah, and we've cried at so many retreats. Like, my God, it's like
Nostalgia. I just had a
nostalgia.
nostalgic moment thinking back to that. That
Yeah,
was the most amazing time. But
yeah,
and again, we can think of this in different stages too. So, like, if
yes.
you made a huge move and moved out of the country, maybe this time where you're like, do I go back home? Is this home? I'm always bringing it back to other examples just so that those who are listening, we can think of whatever you're embarking on, where are you in the
Totally.
process? How does it align?
Something else about Cancer, I also really, whenever you speak, I'm always like, oh, spark, spark. Um, So, like cancer has a lot to do also like yes, family, lineage, and tradition. And so when I think about the rich tradition of astrology,
Mm.
or right, I know I was like, oh my God, that really hit home. And I'm like, this is where I see Gemini and Cancer. Like I love seeing the signs. This is what I love about the story of the round is that it can be very easy, I think, in other forms of astrology or if you're not fully in it, like to be like, oh, this sign doesn't like that sign, blah blah. I call bullshit because I actually think there are more similarities and shared threads than we sometimes realize. And with like, yeah, just realizing like when our professor Tony, he always states this beautiful like poem, I guess, at each graduation, and it always brings us all to tears. And it's highly Geminian with all the curiosity of it, but also deeply Cancerian as well. And so it's just kind of interesting. I guess what I'm getting at is just seeing how the signs are in conversation, in dialogue.
Always. And I think that's really important part of a process-centered approach is that they're not separate, they're not severed from each other. They're all feeding in and part of the round. So
Yeah.
I'm glad that you brought it back to that. We're talking about them kind of like sequentially, but they
Yeah,
all overlap.
they
And
all of
we're not always just moving through it in this kind of way. But
them.
yes, that's so
Oh,
beautiful. And I love that you brought up the tradition and the heritage of
yeah.
astrology and how deeply all of those things fit that Cancer archetype beautifully.
Should we get into Leo land?
Yes, let's get into Leo land. Then now we're moving into an element we've explored before. We're back to fire, but now it's fixed fire. So it's like the hearth, it's like, or the campfire. Yeah. Okay,
Mhm.
perfect. It's right here. We're at the fifth stage, the fifth zodiac sign, Leo.
Yep.
So now we're merging into a new kind of quality. This is the creative, the light, it's ruled by the sun. It's showing up. What is your creative voice, or how can we express ourselves? It's also a lot about vulnerability and showing up wholeheartedly as ourselves in the process. It's just some initial things that come to mind.
You know, I, I'm going to say this 1,000 more times. Sorry, but not sorry. Like, I'm like, I would never give this sign this word, but I wouldn't have thought. But Aries and Leo, I'm like, there is something I think vulnerable about them. And like, when Aries is like truly chasing after something it wants and desires, or Leo, like that takes vulnerability. I'm so glad you said that. Because, yeah, this is self-expression. We've now explored these first four signs, and now it's like, do I want to have an audience, whether that's like a literal audience or symbolic audience? And like I can think of a literal manifestation of how this happened for us. Like you and I are like, hey, hey, oh, I like you, I like you. Oh, you are expressive, I'm expressive. Hey, you
Let's
performed, I
connect.
performed. Let's connect. Do you want to do some games? Do you want to play? Keyword for Leo. Do you want to play and with certain exercises, reflections, astrology centered to get us embodied, to get us having fun with it. Not that we weren't, but um, but like a creative approach to it, that's And so we like literally teamed up and we're like, let's express ourselves. And then so the first retreat we helped to run, we had all these games and reflections and exercises. This was one of them. This is how we started off the first retreat, was literally the story of the round. And yeah, oh,
I love that. And it made me think of also that in doing that, we were starting to develop our own voice or our own way of expressing astrology. And I
yeah.
think that is part of the Leo archetype is finding that creative light that's your own. And so there's at this stage of the process, in the learning process of this program, it's like, well, what is my voice in this or my expression? How do I show up in the astrological community even? Or
Mm.
what am I contributing? You know, what could I, it's not even thinking yet that big because that's moving on to the polarity Aquarius is when you're really starting to think about community, but it's really finding yourself, finding your rhythm, your light, what it is that is you within the process.
Yeah, and again, as you were speaking, like for me, the fire element, it's really about like what is possible. And I think with Leo, like especially when you and I were chatting, we get so excited because it's like, oh my God, there are all these possibilities or all these opportunities to utilize astrology in life, you know? So it literally like lights you up. And what Leo also helps to provide, Aries was the cardinal fire. This is the match. And as you said, Leo, this is the hearth fire. It's fixed like Taurus. Now another square. So another little interesting convo there, but it's fixed fire that can keep going and going and burning if you're tending to it, if you're giving it the attention that it deserves, you know. And oh God, I just lost a thought, but I'm sure it'll come back to me. But yeah, that consistency, loyalty is actually quite Leo. It's a quite a dependable, or it can be a quite dependable, consistent energy. And there's also pride. And as a mood in Leo, do pride is can be great, and that can also bring up its challenges. So this, I can also think of how sometimes I get really defensive of astrology or force astro. If people kind of are like, have their opinions about it on the world, I'm like, it's such a source of pride for me that I'm like, don't you dare talk about my astrology like that.
Well, I love that you brought up pride because that's hitting that vulnerable spot because
Oh
it
yeah,
is so deeply meaningful to us. I was also thinking the first time we led help co-lead the retreat, we we're authentically showing up as ourselves. This is what we wanted
yeah,
to do. We wanted to bring play into it and have a little fun with it. And that's innately vulnerable. The fear that I felt going up there, I think when you're really fully embracing that true, not just putting on a performance, because sometimes we think of Leo only from that perspective. In its real essence, it's being able to show up fully yourself wholeheartedly. There could be criticism that comes, that'll be the next sign that we talk about, right? Virgo. But it's innately scary. You're up
it's so
there, we're like helping to lead a group, but we're putting ourselves out there. This is what we've presented. This is what we have. This is how we would like to engage with astrology and how we would like to share. But the spotlight's on you when you're doing
it
that,
is.
and it can
It's
hit those tender spots.
God, that's such a good point. I'm so glad you brought up the tender spots. And yet again, we see that dialogue, I think, with Cancer, you know? And this is to bring the luminaries in, aka the sun and the moon. Cancer ruled by the moon, Leo ruled by the sun, And like that's like we were talking about care and community and belonging. And then the next step is like maybe there's like been trust and connection built amongst our community or our maybe newfound family members, and willing to be able to give them like pieces of our hearts because like Leo's very heart centered. And I
Yes.
love the generosity, because that can be a very fire thing, a very Leo thing, because ultimately I think, our practices are quite similar. We have some differences, but really like we want to lift people up and like genuine Leo energy that's really used, I think, in a great manner is can really help. It can help to shine the spotlight on others. Like that's a good leader. Like a lot of Leo stuff is associated with leaders and authority figures. It's the sun, but like a really good one is gonna everyone is has the spotlight.
Oh, I always think of the word
Ah,
reciprocity. with Leo, like giving and being able to shine the holding
Yeah,
standing in your like wholehearted self, like standing up, being a light, you're shining your light, but allowing others to have that same light shown on them. But I like that you
totally.
brought up leadership
Oh,
because
yeah.
that's also a big Leo word. And I think leading by example specifically, because Aries can also be associated with leadership. That's the kind of leading, just jumping in and come on, I'm brave, you're gonna that like follow me kind of thing. But Leo is like just having that presence and giving permission for other people to do the same. Because, when you see someone living out their full light, being in that light, it's something, depending on how, let's just say, how conscious we are of our own things that can come up with that. Sometimes you get things can come up that are challenging, but there's usually a sense of like, wow, that's such a beautiful thing to witness. Having the courage to do that, shining out, allows other people, gives
Yeah.
permission for other people to do the same. And I think sometimes, some people at this stage, even in our cohort, were more comfortable doing that than others, taking up space,
I
right?
agree.
Some people are more comfortable with that. But in doing that, it's like, oh, well, maybe I can do that, right?
Yes. It's, like this is maybe not related, but like for example, on my Instagram, I've tried to cater it so it's only influencers or accounts that lifts me up, not stuff that I'm like, oh, I don't feel comfortable seeing that, like, and it really does, like the stuff you like when people are just like people, it's so easy to be like, live yourself, live your truth. But if you actually think about it, it's like, no, but really. Because like you don't know who you could be helping or inspiring. And like we've all felt those moments, and maybe we don't tell the person, I'm like, let's compliment everybody and let them know. But like somebody might say something in class or at your work if you started this new job, for example, right? And like you're deeply inspired because they were just like themselves or they like took their creative approach to it. And then with that, of course, I know there's the shadow stuff too. Um,
Yes.
but like, yeah, are we stepping into overconfidence or are we, um, sometimes the dramatics come up with Leo. But I was thinking about this the other day in the car, and I'm like, yes, drama's associated with Leo, yes, yes, because it's also a fun way sometimes to engage with
Yes.
life. Because like through entertainment or through the flair of the dramatic. It's just because I know Leo can get pigeonholed into being dramatic and this and that. And I think it's deeper than that. I mean, I think there are elements to it, but there's also like a reason sometimes, and the drama of life is going to come up. Not everybody's getting along in the cohort. Like, not everybody are liking at your new job. Like, and by this time we're pretty well into the cycle, we're almost not halfway yet, but like we're getting there. So stuff is coming up. I don't know.
Stuff is absolutely coming up. And while on one hand, seeing people step into their light can be inspiring, it can also, depending on what issues we are dealing with at any given moment, it can feel like shrinking. So this is another place where we can start to get stuck. We can go, oh,
Mm,
look at this person. They know so much. Look at them. They're visible.
they're
They're a
practiced.
practice already. Sometimes people are ready to start doing consultations and that
Yeah.
they have that kind of courage to go for and are just going with it and they're standing out in the cohort, right? They're
Yeah.
really like a shining student or whatever.
Yes.
But if you're not feeling that way, or if you're not comfortable with that archetype, you might say, oh, look at them. They're taking so much space. They're taking up so much space. And some people, of course, like you said, that is possible. There could be overly taking up too
Yep.
much space.
Yep.
But in response that there could also be a shrinking that can happen or like maybe I'm not right for this, not because you're really not right for it, because of course maybe that's something that you have to deal with and
Yeah.
questioning yourself, but it could also simply be an old thing that's getting kicked up, or this part of the process can be hard, taking up space and saying, yeah, I am for this. I
Yeah.
deserve to go forth and share of myself creatively and be fully embrace this. So that can be an area where maybe people go, okay, maybe no, this is where I stop.
Well, I mean, I think especially for Leo stuff, and I will be the first to admit this, like jealousy is a big, big thing I think that can come up. And it's hard at this stage to not compare and contrast. Like we're still dealing with that, in our own astro careers, because some people they have started their website year one, and some of us are still millionaires, or that's me. It's hard not to compare, to contrast. And even though Leo gets all this like shining. I'm so glad you brought up if we're not like embracing it and working with it, we might fall back and shrink back. And also, what's interesting is you're like, this is where we might get stuck again. I'm like, oh yeah,
Next
because
time.
fixed
Yeah.
sign. I was like, that's, and again, we're seeing that rhythm of the Zodiac. We're seeing the rhythm of the story of the round. So we got, maybe we faced some stagnancy with Taurus. Maybe now we're meeting it in Leo as well.
Right, and we can meet it also by getting so, and we'll move on to the next sign
I
in
think
a
so.
moment, but getting so caught up in that creative place
Yeah.
that maybe we don't want to move on to that. Okay, now that we feel so good about what we're doing, maybe
Yeah.
that it's time to kind of take a step back and think, okay, well, I'm starting to find my voice. How can I be most of service with this? How can this be most useful to others or whatnot? So this is where we might move on to the Virgo process.
In all transparency, we paused the recording to chit chat, just about like, oh, what do you think about certain logistical things? And I was like, this is so Virgo, right? Like, oh, hold on, let's think about how, okay, what do these pieces work here? Maybe we need to adjust here. Do we need to edit this? Like we literally walked into Virgo territory with
We did.
that.
I press pause. I'm like, how are you feeling energy wise? Should we kind of should we do this in two sections? We had talked about this before. We didn't go into this episode completely without any plan, but we really are trying to embrace
Yeah.
both of us are really working on embracing just being present with what comes up, which is
Yeah.
like I like to have things a little bit more scripted and whatnot. So that Virgo, that Virgo archetype, even in what I'm saying right now, is getting. I can hear it. I can hear it. Like, oh, is this? How is this going? Is this going well? So, anyways, we did
Yeah.
pause it for a second, and we are going to continue on, but we are
Yeah.
going to offer this in two sections. So we're going to have the first six signs, and then the next episode will be released with the next six signs.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Virgo territory.
Beautiful. I honestly love that that happens, and I appreciate your honesty and vulnerability there, because we are both like leaning in because like we know our stuff, but this kind of exercise, you can't like what I like about it is like, okay, are you willing to trust yourself and like go into this kind of exercise and see just what flows, right? And
Right.
so this
Which
leads us
is
in,
terrifying for me. I will say something. Yeah.
and if we're going to be honest, one of us has Saturn and Virgo. One of us has some challenges with Virgo energies.
Yeah. Saturn Virgo over here. Yep. That
Yep.
would be me. Yeah.
Yep. Virgo's my 12th house. I don't have any planets there, but it is an energy I pull in through other people. And maybe it's because I got a Leo stuff. I can struggle with it. Um, so
Yeah,
just
so here we go. So this is the
for
part of
Virgo.
the process where things can get tricky for Sid. And it
Yeah.
is also a critical turning point. And if we want to pull back, you want to pull
Oh,
up
thank you.
the
Yes.
zodiac. Now we're at the sixth
Everything.
sign. We're like at the almost at the halfway point where Libra is, right? So we're in the and we're still in the first stage, the first half. This is a big transition. So Virgo now takes us from Leo to Virgo. Virgo, we've got Earth, we've got mutability, and
Mm.
so this is a practical oriented sign. This is a sign that is very tends to be very adaptable, flexible, constantly tweaking things. How can I make this better? How can this be improved upon? How is this useful to people? So great that you've got a talent, but if you can't put it into any kind of useful way, nobody's going to want it. Like, what are you going to, if you're going to be a professional astrologer, you can have all this charisma and light, but like if you don't know how you're going to be useful with it, maybe people don't want what you're buying, right? Or what you're
I love
selling.
that.
Maybe
I'm
people don't want
sorry.
what you're
That
selling.
was so funny. I loved how you did
I
that.
don't even know what I'm saying at this point,
So
but
you got a talent.
I hear my Virgo, the critic
Oh,
coming in, like, you could have said that better, Simona. What are you saying? You sound, that's
no.
very Virgo. And at this stage, if you like in our studies, we can start to all of a
Mm.
sudden, maybe we get some feedback, some homework feedback, or we get something that's like, ouch, ooh, this could have been, and all of a sudden things get kicked up, right?
Oh my God.
So this is also a stage where discernment is really important. It's like at this point, we have taken in so much information. So now we're talking about, Mark Jones talks about the axis of learning, the third, Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. And so this is building off of Gemini, now is Virgo, right? Both ruled by Mercury. How do we take the information we've learned so far and distill it down and get more clear with it and kind of filter out the stuff that isn't really resonating? What are we taking from this? And how do
Mhm.
we get more clear so that we don't get overwhelmed and fall off, which can happen. This is when people start to fall behind, right?
Yeah. God, those are just all such amazing points. My God. Yeah, because it really is. I think I started really feeling this. I mean, there were some moments in year one, but definitely year two, because year two, year three, we're getting into, like year two, you're getting into aspects. So how the planets are geometrically aligned with one another and what the vibe of those conversations might be. We're getting into more techniques. Third year, it gets really it gets hard pretty quickly because astrology is such a huge system, and while it gets this bent of being, it's not spiritual for everybody. So I when people a lot of astrologers are, but let's not always assume that they are, because it's quite a cerebral, kind of intellectual, kind of sometimes cold. It's literally technique, craft, skill, detail, precision, work, analysis. Whew. And that is hard because now you are looking in your homework, you're doing these aspects and also this, but then you're also having to say this, and it's very trying to keep it technical but still try and maybe keep some of the Leo personality of it and the Cancerian hearts and the curiosity of Gemini, the groundedness of Taurus. Like you're working with all these things, and Virgo is like, okay, I have all these multiple things in the air. Like unlike Gemini, I also want to bring this down to earth. Like how, like literally, how is this information going to be useful? How's it going to serve others? And this isn't really working anymore for me. So we got to adjust. Very Virgo kind of word there. Whew.
Yeah, no, it's so true. A lot of adjustments, and how do you do that while still maintaining the joy, the Leo joy? And I
Yeah.
think that is where this is can be a very difficult because there is so much excitement at the beginning, and then you're learning, you're starting to get it, and you found your family, and you're starting to show up, and you're like, I've got this, and this feels great. And then all of a sudden, it's like, there could be that crisis moment where you're like, I don't know enough. I'll never know enough. I'll never be good enough. I mean, now we're starting to, it sounds a little more like Saturn's coming in here. So I'm getting a little, Saturn and Virgo specifically is coming through, like that judgment. But,
Yep.
but there is that like self-criticism that can come in.
Right.
So I think this is a stage where, and let's translate this to something else. For example, a new job. How might that translate? This can be a time where maybe you're starting to find that you are burnt out a little bit and you're starting to receive feedback that is a little bit more critical, and you have to kind of regroup and find ways to still work this out and adjust to what
Yeah.
there could be a lot of changes that are happening in the new job. If you've started a new job, this is a time where this is going to call maybe for flexibility, or you're going to have to really ask yourself, you know, am I really stepping up here? How can I improve what
Yeah.
I'm doing? These kinds of questions that might come up.
Oh my God, they're all of them will come up. And they do, and they have. And I sometimes I feel like this is a phase, and I'm pretty sure you can connect, that I can get stuck in or fall back into, especially once you leave the nest of the school. And also what I'm realizing as we're talking, especially as it comes after Leo, it's like all this stuff is coming up with Virgo. Like and Virgo's like associated with like the guts, the intestines, like ugh, and that can get all like ugh. And it's kind of health, the body is also associated with Virgo. So I think it's also asking us though, like, okay, this stuff is going to come up. So are you, and this like takes some Leo stuff too. How are you paying attention to your body and yourself? As you said, the burnout, like, are we creating systems here that are manageable, that are helping
Mm.
us maintain? So like it might be really annoying, but it's maybe showing us something to work with, you know? But it can feel kind of annoying, but I also want to give credit, but then I'm like, maybe that's also my personal bias with Virgo, because we all have our biases with certain signs, because sometimes it can be hard to admit that something needs adjustment. And after the pride of Leo,
Hmm.
that can kind of be hard to shed. Like, well, but I like doing it this way and blah, 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 blah. And Virgo's like, but it's not, you're not helping yourself anymore. You're not. Like you've got
Yes.
to, maybe Virgo's actually the one that's like, we need to schedule more breaks in how you're studying. You need to also remember that there's also this other stuff in your life that might need attention to, you know? So maybe it could, it's so helpful. It can be so helpful.
No, it is a great word for Virgo. Yes, it can be incredibly helpful, this is a time though that you really.
Mm,
I keep coming back to the word discernment because I think that's a
yeah.
very Virgo word, and it's a time in the stage where you're really discerning too if this is, are we moving on? I think we're always doing that with every stage, but
Yeah.
I think there's this necessary criticism that has to come in to kind of take us down a little bit because if
Yeah.
we're really going to become professional astrologers,
Hmm.
while we want to always lean into that joy and that spark, there are going to be plenty of moments when that is not there. And so we have to really kind of find a way to continue on and still be useful and helpful to others, even if we're not always feeling that spark all the time. How can we adjust and adapt when things aren't easy or when we hear those moments when we those that self-criticism comes in? How do we work with that? How do
Yeah.
we continue moving forward with that?
And I forget sometimes, it's silly maybe. I forget that Virgo is Earth because, some astrologers are like all the air signs plus Virgo. And I see, oh my God, the similarities between Virgo and Aquarius drive me wild. And of course, the two energies I struggle with, I'm like, hey guys, but it is Earth. And
Yes.
something I have to remember about Virgo energies, like our friend Natalie, she does amazing is it cross stitching? Is that what it's called? Like the craft, working with your hands, or pottery comes into my mind. A lot of artistic outlets. Yeah, that's Leo. That's also, I mean, all the signs can have artistic outlets, of course. But like what I'm getting to is just like the craft, refining it and remembering to work with our hands. And Virgo it is the mind and the hands. Like Taurus is very like the body, the sensualness, woohoo, you know. But and Virgo is like that plus some technical stuff too. But like, yeah, like remembering to come back down to earth a little bit because now this is the second earth sign we're encountering in the cycle. So, oh right, how can I bring this back? So it's like the consistent sleep schedule, at least for me. I'm coming back. I touched on this with Taurus, and I was finding this a struggle with my studies and still now, like the my sleep routines, like making sure I'm eating holistically, getting the nutrients I need, the movement of the body. Because, there's a like I always think of like yoga, Pilates, like all kind of working out associated with Virgo a lot, and keeping the minds and the body in
Body, the
communication.
mind body connection.
Yeah.
Absolutely, because it is a Mercury ruled sign.
Yeah.
So there's that mental component, but it's within that earth element. So that's a little bit about Virgo. So we've now we've now gone through the six signs. We've played with them a little bit here,
Yeah.
and we'll go ahead and stop for this episode, and then we'll continue
Love it.
on with the next six signs. So thank you
Virgo.
for joining us, and we can't wait to continue with this process with you.
Yes, and make sure to, like, follow, subscribe to the Astro Lounge podcast as we continue. We want to build a beautiful community here. So share, follow, like, and you can find me at Hiya, HIYA _ Kaia, KAIA astrology, and website's still in process, but I'll take your readings and consultations. Oh yeah.
You can find me on Instagram at the dot cosmic wanderer, and that's WONDERER. And my website is the cosmic wanderer with no dot. So that's it. And
Yay.
please, we'd love to hear if you are on a new journey or where you might be in the process with something, we'd love to hear about it.
Absolutely. Oh, I can't wait to get to the second half. All
Me
right.
too. Can't wait.
Love
Bye
you.
for
See you
now.
soon.
See you soon. Bye.